They say life has a strange way of teaching us lessons, not through comfort, but through contrast. And sometimes, the greatest mirrors are held not by those who have everything, but by those who have nothing. It was a cold morning in the city. The streets were alive with noise, the endless rhythm of footsteps, car horns, and hurried conversations. Among that chaos, a man sat quietly beneath a leafless tree. His clothes were torn, his shoes nearly falling apart. In front of him rested a small metal cup, dented and dull. Every few minutes, someone would drop a coin, not out of kindness, but out of habit. And yet, despite his worn appearance, there was something oddly peaceful about his eyes. He wasn't watching people with desperation. He was observing them, like someone who had once been part of their world but had long since stepped away from it. Across the street, a luxury car stopped in front of a cafe. From it stepped a man in a dark suit, polished shoes, expensive watch, phone glued to his ear. His name was Daniel Mercer, a 45-year-old businessman who had everything money could buy, except peace. He ran one of the most successful marketing firms in the city. To outsiders, he was the image of success, power, control, and confidence. But inside, Daniel felt hollow. He had climbed every mountain, yet the view never satisfied him. His life was filled with deadlines, numbers, and noise. And somewhere along the way, he had forgotten how to listen. That morning, Daniel was late for a meeting. He rushed out of the cafe, coffee in one hand, briefcase in the other. As he passed the old beggar, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a coin, and tossed it without looking. The coin missed the cup and rolled onto the ground, landing beside the beggar's foot. Daniel didn't even notice. He was already walking away. But then he heard a voice. Calm, gentle, firm. Sir, the beggar said, picking up the coin. You dropped something that doesn't belong to me. Daniel turned around, slightly annoyed. It's fine. Keep it, he said briskly, waving his hand. But the beggar smiled and replied. No, I think you need it more than I do. The street noise seemed to fade. Daniel blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. What did you say? The beggar looked up, his eyes steady and kind. You look like a man carrying the weight of gold, and yet, you walk as if you have nothing. Daniel felt a strange chill crawl up his spine. For a moment, he couldn't speak. He wanted to be angry, to dismiss it as nonsense, but something about the man's calmness disarmed him. He crouched slightly, studying the beggar's face. Do I know you? He asked. The beggar chuckled softly. Once perhaps. We've all known each other in some way. We just forget. Daniel frowned. You're quite philosophical for someone sitting on the street. And you're quite lost for someone who seems to have found everything. The beggar replied gently. Daniel didn't know why, but he felt a sting in his chest. A strange mixture of anger and shame. He reached for his coin again. Here, take it. Buy yourself some food. The beggar shook his head. Food fills the stomach, not the soul. Daniel sighed, dropped the coin into the cup anyway, and walked off. But the beggar's words followed him like an echo he couldn't escape. You look like a man carrying the weight of gold, and yet, you walk as if you have nothing. That night, Daniel sat in his luxurious apartment, glass walls overlooking the city. He poured himself a drink, trying to shake off the unease. The city lights sparkled below, yet everything felt empty. His phone buzzed, emails, messages, numbers. But the only thing he could hear was the beggar's voice. He turned the coin over in his hand, staring at it under the dim lamp. Why did that man's words bother him so much? He had met hundreds of people, employees, investors, clients, and yet none had ever spoken to him like that. Maybe because they all wanted something from him. But that beggar wanted nothing. And somehow, that made his words feel heavier than gold. For the first time in years, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept asking himself questions he didn't have the courage to answer. When was the last time I was truly happy? When was the last time I felt alive, not just busy? When did I start mistaking success for peace? The city outside kept moving, unaware that one of its richest men was finally breaking, quietly, invisibly, inside his own mind. The next morning, before dawn, Daniel made a decision. He would go back to that street. Not to give, but to understand. He didn't know it yet. But that single decision would lead him to the greatest truth of his life. A truth that no amount of money could ever buy. The next morning, the sky was pale and gray, a quiet contrast to Daniel's restless mind. He stood at his window, watching people rush to work, just as he had every day. But today, something inside him refused to rush. He grabbed his coat, left his phone on the counter, and drove downtown, to the same old tree, to the same corner where he had seen the beggar. When he arrived, the man was there, sitting cross-legged, feeding crumbs of bread to a few pigeons. He looked peaceful, almost timeless, as if the noise of the world no longer belonged to him. Daniel approached slowly. "Good morning," he said. The beggar looked up, smiling. "It's a good morning indeed. You came back." Daniel nodded. "I couldn't stop thinking about what you said yesterday." "Ah." The beggar chuckled softly. "Then my words have done their work." Daniel frowned, confused. "Your work?" "Yes. To plant seeds. I never know which will grow, but it seems one took root in you." Daniel sighed and sat down beside him, the expensive fabric of his coat brushing against the cold pavement. "Can I ask how you ended up here?" The beggar didn't answer right away. He gazed at the pigeons fluttering around his feet. "Once upon a time," he began quietly, "I was like you, a man of numbers, meetings, and endless days that felt the same. I chased success so hard that I forgot to breathe. Then one morning, I lost everything: my job, my family, my home. At first, I thought life had punished me. But now, I see it was only giving me a chance to begin again, differently." Daniel listened, his throat tight. "You sound calm, like you've accepted it." The beggar smiled. "Acceptance isn't giving up. It's seeing things as they are, not as we wish them to be." For hours, they talked. About life. About meaning. About how people build walls of wealth to protect themselves from emptiness, not realizing they trap their own hearts inside. The beggar said, "Most men spend their lives chasing things they can touch and ignore what they can feel. But everything real, peace, love, joy, begins here." He pointed to his chest. Daniel was silent. Those words didn't sound like something from a man who had lost. They sounded like wisdom earned through fire. "You're different," Daniel finally said. "Most people in your position would be angry, bitter." The beggar chuckled. "I was for a long time, until I realized anger feeds the fire that burns us. One day, I chose to forgive life, and it forgave me back." Daniel looked down at the cup between them. Inside it were a few coins, maybe a day's worth. He felt a strange respect for this man who had nothing, yet seemed to possess everything Daniel lacked. Days turned into weeks. Each morning, before heading to his office, Daniel stopped by the old tree. He'd bring 2 cups of coffee, one for himself, one for the beggar. Their conversations became a quiet ritual. Daniel began to notice changes in himself. He smiled more. He spoke less, but listened more. He started saying, "Thank you," not out of politeness, but from genuine gratitude. His employees noticed it too. The man who once barked orders now asked how they were doing. Meetings that used to feel like battles now felt human. One morning, Daniel asked, "Do you ever wish to go back to your old life?" The beggar took a slow sip of coffee. "Sometimes, but I remind myself, I'm not who I was back then. The man I used to be believed happiness was waiting at the top of a ladder. Now I know it's found at the bottom of my heart." Daniel smiled faintly. He looked around. The city felt quieter, lighter somehow. And for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about deadlines, contracts, or profits. He was just present. As weeks passed, Daniel began to see the beggar as more than a stranger. He was a teacher, maybe even a mirror reflecting the truth Daniel had avoided for years. One evening, before leaving, Daniel asked his name. The beggar looked amused. "Names are like coats," he said. "We wear them for others to recognize us, but they don't define what's beneath." Daniel laughed. "Still, I'd like to know the name of the man who keeps outsmarting me." The beggar's eyes softened. "Elias," he said finally. "My name is Elias." "Elias," Daniel repeated quietly. "It suits you." That night, Daniel wrote something in his journal for the first time in years. "Today I met a man who is less than me, yet lives richer than I ever have." He stared at the words until they blurred. Something inside him shifted, not like a sudden lightning strike, but like the slow turning of dawn after a long night. He didn't know it yet, but Elias's lessons were changing the architecture of his soul, brick by brick, thought by thought. For the first time, Daniel began to understand the real meaning of poverty. It wasn't about lacking money. It was about lacking meaning. And for the first time, he realized that maybe, just maybe, he had been the beggar all along. It had been 3 months since Daniel first met Elias. And in that time, something extraordinary happened. Not to his company, not to his bank account, but to him. He no longer saw people as transactions. He smiled at strangers. He called his sister again, after years of silence. And every morning, without fail, he visited Elias, the man who had taught him that wisdom doesn't come from wealth, but from awareness. But one cold winter morning, Elias wasn't there. The spot beneath the old tree was empty. No cup, no crumbs, no soft humming of his morning tune. Just silence. Daniel looked around, expecting him to appear any second. Minutes passed, then an hour. The pigeons waited too, cooing softly as if confused. A strange unease filled Daniel's chest. He asked nearby vendors if they had seen the old man. One woman shook her head. Another said, "He hasn't been here for 2 days." Something inside Daniel broke, a fear he couldn't explain. He searched the nearby alleys, shelters, and parks. Everywhere he went, he asked the same question. "Have you seen an old man named Elias? He used to sit by the big tree downtown." Most people didn't even know who he was talking about. To the city, Elias had been invisible, like most souls who live quietly, unnoticed yet full of light. By sunset, Daniel's shoes were soaked, his hands trembling. He found himself back at the same tree, exhausted, staring at the empty space where Elias used to sit. Then, as the last bit of daylight faded, something caught his eye. A small object, half buried beneath the tree roots. He bent down and brushed away the dirt. It was Elias's old metal cup. Inside it was a folded piece of paper, slightly wet, but still legible. Daniel's hands shook as he opened it. In simple, uneven handwriting, the letter read, "My friend, if you're reading this, it means my journey here is done. Don't be sad. Endings are just new beginnings wearing different clothes." You once asked how a man with nothing could smile. The answer is simple. I stopped measuring life by what I had, and started feeling it by what I gave. We're all beggars, Daniel. Some of us ask for coins. Others ask for love, validation, or time. But the moment you stop asking and start giving, life begins to give back in ways you can't imagine. You once gave me a coin without looking. I give it back to you now. Look closely at it. You'll find more than metal there. You'll find yourself. At the bottom of the cup lay the same shiny coin Daniel had given Elias months ago. Only now, it was polished so brightly that it reflected his face like a mirror. Daniel stared at his reflection for a long, silent moment. Then tears rolled down his cheeks. He finally understood. The coin wasn't meant for Elias. It was meant for him. A mirror to see who he truly was beneath the noise, beneath the titles, beneath the wealth. That night, Daniel didn't go home. He sat under the old tree until dawn, holding the cup and the letter close to his heart. When morning came, something inside him had changed forever. He went to his office as usual, but not as the same man. He walked in, gathered his team, and said, "From today, we do things differently. This company will not just make money. It will make meaning." He launched a new program, helping the homeless find jobs, teaching financial literacy, funding shelters. He named it Project Elias. And every week, Daniel returned to the old tree, not to seek wisdom anymore, but to give it. He'd sit with anyone who stopped, share coffee, listen to their stories, offer hope. And sometimes, he'd hand them a coin, the same one Elias had once returned, polished to a mirror's shine. "Keep this," he'd say. "It's not for spending. It's for remembering." When people looked confused, he'd smile and add, "Sometimes, what you give away will show you who you really are." Years passed. Daniel's hair turned gray, but his eyes grew gentler. The world knew him as a philanthropist, a man who had built a bridge between wealth and wisdom. But he never called himself that. He always said, "I was just lucky enough to meet a teacher disguised as a beggar." Every morning, he still placed a cup beneath the tree, not to collect coins, but to remind himself that true abundance begins the moment you stop asking and start giving. Sometimes, the people we overlook are the very ones holding the mirrors we need most. Sometimes, one sentence can shatter the illusion of a lifetime. And sometimes, a single coin can change the weight of a man's soul. True poverty is not of the wallet, but of the spirit. Change your mindset, and your life will change with it. The Mirror Coin, a story about awakening, gratitude, and the quiet power of perspective. If this story touched something inside you, subscribe so you won't miss more stories like this one. Share it with someone who needs to remember that life can change if we dare to look inside the mirror. Leave your support with a like if it made you reflect. And remember, time cannot be bought. It cannot be stored. It can only be lived. And the best moment to start is now.